Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast, where the art and science of operational excellence come to life through captivating stories of triumph, challenge, and transformation from the front lines of industry. Our distinguished guests, from manufacturing pioneers and medical device innovators to aerospace visionaries, diagnostic lab leaders, and major capital project leaders, unveil the hidden patterns and powerful insights that drive exceptional results in the complex world of operations. Join us on this journey of discovery as we explore the brilliant minds behind the systems that make our world work and uncover the leadership secrets that could revolutionize your approach to operations forever. Here is your host, Ed Pound.
Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest, a leader at the forefront of electronics manufacturing. He has spent decades driving quality and innovation in the industry, and he's recently been named the Chief Global Officer of the Global Electronics Association, formerly the IPC, the organization helping the world build electronics better. Over 3,000 companies rely on IPC's standards, training, and advocacy programs. Our guest has been instrumental in expanding GEA's reach across Europe and Asia. He's a true global champion for electronics manufacturing and operations science. Welcome to the podcast, Sanjay Huprikar. Hey, Sanjay, how are you?
Hello, Ed Pound. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. For the audience, in case they don't know, we actually have a little bit of a history working together at Factory Physics, Inc. back in the day. So you've got good familiarity with operations science. So let's get into it. The big issue on everybody's mind when you're talking about global associations are trade policy and tariffs, and they've been front and center. From your perspective, how are these policies affecting and impacting manufacturers, particularly electronics manufacturers?
Yeah, it's a great question to start with. And as you said, it's a very topical discussion. News is shifting almost on a per minute basis as we go here. Oh, I'll give you the 2 bullet point overview. As an association, we don't believe in tariffs. We think we are very much about free market, free enterprise.
Yep.
The other truth about a tariff is that, unlike what the politicians may say and what the journalists may say, it creates winners and losers. It is not a win-win or a lose-lose. It is often a win-lose situation. A global supply chain and a global industry is really made up of a network of regional supply chains and regional industries. And so while we understand as an association that from a protectionist standpoint, from an organizational or government philosophy standpoint, tariffs are going to be implemented, what we try to tell organizations and governments is that if you're going to implement tariffs, that's only half the ballgame. What are you doing when you implement a tariff? What you're basically saying is that we're relying on our own domestic market, our own domestic industry to meet the needs and services of our domestic market. But if they don't have the capability or capacity, who's getting hurt by that, right? So we are advocating what we're saying from a Global Electronics Association standpoint, as we deal with governments, is that if you're going to implement tariffs, fine. You also need to implement policies that invest in your manufacturing, whether that's capability, whether that's capacity enhancement, whether that's innovation. You have to have both in order for it to actually have a reasonable shot at being successful. Implementing tariffs on its own without any government intervention or funding of capacity and capability is a no-win situation for everybody. So that is what we are fighting for is, fine, if you're going to do tariffs, then let's make sure that you're investing in your capacity and capability as well.
And are you seeing what sort of response are you getting to that message?
Right now, we're at the nods, kind of makes sense what you're saying stage. No real, I would say, activity or implementation yet. And you know this better than most people. Moving the government is not a daily, monthly, or even an annual thing. It takes 5 to 10 years. But you got to have the conversation start somewhere, and we're starting that conversation now.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I completely get it and understand the protectionists and, wanting to bulk up home markets. Although, so there is that trade-off, right? Because then you have duplicate capacity everywhere. And so.
And you have the natural tension between a multinational company that has facilities and operations everywhere versus, your one site, two site, which is very focused on a given market. And you have natural tensions between there. So again, I want to be honest with your viewers. There is no win-win here. This is a win-lose.
Yep. Well, we'll see how it shakes out. Like you say, it's changing daily. So is that the biggest challenge for electronics industry these days? What are some of the other ones?
I mean, the challenges are unlimited. I mean, certainly tariff policy, trade restrictions is a big piece of it. But here's what else we're seeing: demand volatility, cybersecurity threat, supply chain disruption, geopolitical instability, and that leads to some of the tariffs that we talked about. Raw material costs, skill shortage, labor shortage. I don't know how much time we have, but I think I'll stop there.
Well, I know. I'm wondering how anybody stays in business.
Exactly. But these are legitimate issues that businesses across the world are seeing. Now, in some markets, say India and China, labor shortage is not the biggest issue there. They've got plenty of labor, but are they being given the right programs to skill and upskill? So that's a legitimate concern in a place like India and China. In other parts of the world, as soon as Brexit happened, as an example, the UK lost 1/3 of its workforce.
Right.
Regulatory landscape, legislative landscape, how does it impact and inform compliance with environmental restrictions, with sustainability restrictions? I mean, electronics manufacturers have to face all of these issues on a daily basis.
So, in the intro, it said 3,000 manufacturers. What's the distribution of sizes there? I mean, are 10% of them, multi-billion-dollar companies, or most of them?
That's a great question. So let me add one thing to the number you picked. So yes, we are a member-driven association. So today we have 3,200 members globally. I would say about half of those reside in the US or North American market. The other half are outside. That's a big change from when I started. When I started at the aforementioned IPC in 2012, 75% of our members were North American and the other 25 were outside. So while both pieces of pie have grown over the last 13 years, the international pie has grown bigger. As far as the distribution in terms of size within that, 80% of our members have turnover of less than 25 million annually. And I would say maybe 10% of our members have turnover of greater than 2.5 billion annually. So those are the two endpoints. And then you've got that little distribution in the middle as well.
So that's interesting. I mean, I've noticed that about the EMS industry. Why do you think that is? I mean, it's just easy to buy some machines, wave soldering machines, and set up a business, or what drives that?
What drives the fact that you've got this spectrum of very small versus very large?
Well, what drives the fact that there are so many small businesses, small manufacturers in that?
I mean, it's with any business, right? There's an opportunity there. I mean, if you look what the OEMs are doing, I mean, Ed and I, you and I grew up in a world back in the 80s and 90s where there was no such thing as the EMS industry. All of the companies were doing vertical end-to-end manufacturing. A lot of companies were doing their own. And then they started farming it out because they saw cost reduction opportunities by having this cottage industry called contract manufacturing, and contract manufacturing became the EMS industry. And then it became the ODM industry. And I think what's happening is last I checked, 45%, or it's actually probably closer to 50% of the electronics products that are built are still built by the original equipment manufacturers, the OEMs. And they are finally catching along to the fact that, hey, we'd probably be better off if we had somebody else do this, and we'll focus on branding and design. So there are new opportunities every day to take on more electronics manufacturing business. And some of that business is going to incumbents, and some of that business is going to some upstarts that are saying, hey, I can build that. I've got the core competency to do that. And if a company is looking for local manufacturing, those opportunities present themselves too. So as we continue to see the electronics industry growing, it's now a $6 trillion industry. And as you see more OEMs decide that they don't want to do their own manufacturing and they'd rather farm that out, you're going to see continuous growth in EMS.
Yeah, so along those lines, I mean, typically what happens in a market like that is the PE guys show up and they start rolling up businesses. Do you see any of that activity going on?
There's a lot of merger activity going on right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of venture capital work being done. There's a lot of private equity that's engaged in this as well. The margins in EMS tend to be small, but if you have volume, you can make a multiple on it. And I think everyone sees the opportunity there.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's going there's a lot of money washing around, and that sounds like an opportunity for it. So when you're working with guys and they've got all this, your members and they have all these challenges, what are some of the best practices those guys have for dealing with all this volatility and managing their businesses profitably, even though they have fairly small margins?
That's a great question. I mean, I think what everyone is aiming for now, and we've kind of, with our evolution to Global Electronics Association, our mission is help our industry grow and strengthen supply chain resilience. I think that's the area that companies are gravitating towards is supply chain resilience. So what does that mean? That can be in a lot of different ways. But I think the way we've kind of outlined it and framed it for the EMS industry and for the electronics industry in general, there's five big pieces of that, what we call supply chain resilience. There's an aspect of global trade and global access. You have trusted, helping organizations with trusted supply chains, making sure the right export controls are in place, trade agreements and trade tariffs are part of that piece. There's the capability of countries. So there's this notion of nearshoring or regional manufacturing. Are the right policies in place? Are subsidies in place if needed? Are the right incentives in place to do regional manufacturing? Third is taking advantage of technology. So, being part of works that's being done by consortiums, solutions houses that are out there, the work that's going on in innovation. That's a piece of supply chain resiliency that more EMS companies need to adopt. Is they need to be better about understanding what's going on with technology in the future. The fourth piece of it is what I call supply chain harmonization, workforce related issues, standards, industry standards. What are the sustainability practices companies are following? What are the quality goals companies are trying to meet? That all falls into this notion of supply chain harmonization. And then the last one, I think, what we like to call industry intelligence, other people call market data, is just making sure that the right people are engaged in thought leadership, making sure that the data out there is valid, making sure the data is real, so that the companies that are in our space know exactly, where they stand in the food chain. They can compare themselves and benchmark themselves to other people. They may have some advantage in certain areas, but they may have some deficiencies in other areas. So if we do our job properly and provide them the right industry intelligence, I think that's how we're doing it. So to summarize, global trade, country capabilities, technology solutions, supply chain harmonization, and industry intelligence are the five pieces that we're focused on to help companies become more resilient.
That sounds great. And how is that? You started out as a standards organization. Is that most of your work? You do training also, advocacy. Where are your efforts directed?
Yeah, so here's a good history lesson for your viewers. So IPC originally started out as the Institute of Printed Circuits. That's the original acronym.
Okay.
Back in 1957. It started off as an association just focused on printed circuit board fabrication. 6 companies in the Chicago area. You and I both live in the Chicago area. This is the birthplace of IPC.
I did not realize that.
As the association evolved, we started adding in assembly, equipment, materials, and then the OEMs joined, and the OEMs joining and us bringing in the Mill Aero standards into IPC kind of launched our standards development presence. So that what we are officially known for, we have always been thought of as a standards development organization. And then the training and the certification programs became an offshoot of that. Better part of 1957 all the way to say 2008, 2009, right around the time of the bubble burst, we were predominantly standards focused and training and certification focused. I would say the last 15 years, while we still do those things and those are still considered core, we've been leaning much more heavily into now government relations, advocacy, more networking, more events driven organization. We do a lot of communications. We beyond certification, we're doing more things in the areas of workforce development now. So we're broadening our scope and really making that transition from being a standards development organization to being a full-fledged trade association.
Okay. Wow, that sounds like quite an evolution.
Yeah, it's been, and I've only been here 13 years of that history. So while it's been a lot of work for us and our teams, it's only a small piece of what's actually gone on if you look at what's happened the last 70 years.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I have 70 years, but it sounds like a good role model for the Operation Science Institute. A lot of those issues are the same things that we're trying to address in terms of getting the word out, which I have to ask, are you seeing anybody because we used to do back in the days of factory physics, we did some training for IPC, and you were talking about benchmarking. And as you know, the idea with Operation Science is, well, you don't have to benchmark against other people. You can benchmark against yourself and seeing if you're doing as well as you should be doing, and then understand if that meets the market needs. Do you see understanding of Operation Science and application of, for instance, the flow benchmarking?
Let me answer that in the best way I can. In all my years of experience in manufacturing, and certainly the last 13, 14 years in EMS and PCB, I can tell you that I wish more companies would adopt Operation Science. I think a lot of problems can be solved, and even more so, a lot of problems could be avoided if people adopted the techniques and the science. The reality is they do little pieces of it. I like to think of Operation Science as an institution, and something like Lean, I look at as a department of that institution, right? And you referenced it earlier in our conversation. I was part of your organization back 15 years ago when you were factory physics, and I just fell in love with this notion of there's actually a scientific approach to addressing the uncertainty and variability in a production system, right? Before I got to that stage, those were thoughts that never crossed my mind. But as I sat through and I learned and I listened from you and from Mark Spearman and from Jeff Bell and from all these gurus, it's fascinating to me that more people don't understand even what basic uncertainty and variability is. I mean, you have variability in demand, you have variability in your processing time, in your machine availability, in when the materials show up to the door, right? And this notion that there's a science that allows you to incorporate three key buffers: capacity, inventory, and time. And the trick is designing those in such a way that allow you to address whatever your goals are for cost, service level, and throughput. How can you not be in love with that concept? And yet, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's learnable. I think there's an opportunity with good marketing, with good promotion. We and you've done a phenomenal job of starting the institute, and you've got some real high profile companies that are doing this stuff. And I just think there's more opportunity for us as thought leaders to get this stuff across. And the EMS industry would be great because they're dealing all the time with high mix, low volume, right? Unless you're Jabil or Flex or Foxconn, okay, that's three companies. Most of the rest of the EMS world do not deal with low mix, high volume. They're dealing with just the flip of that, high mix and low volume. Well, these tools and these things are great, but what happens is everyone focuses on things like what I call the department, lean, as an example. Well, what is lean? In my view, lean is, well, you're reducing inventory. Okay, but that doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to think about the other two buffers. If you're going to reduce inventory, that's going to cost you in time and capacity, right? But how many people think that way? Nobody thinks that way.
We're working it, and your input, your ideas of support are always greatly appreciated. But it is one of those things where I've really not had anybody, a couple of things we've had. One that's the reason we changed from factory physics to Operation Science, was because, first of all, it applies everywhere, and if you go into a hospital, they'd say, we're not a factory. Even if you went to a factory, they say, oh, that sounds cool. Physics is cool, but that sounds really hard. So I'm not sure about that. But Operation Science really takes that part out of the equation. And it is an issue of just adapting it to a particular person's job, because you can't do pizza delivery training. You have to really apply it. But we'll keep fighting the good fight. But let's get back to the GA. So what are you guys offering? Where are you focusing on training and upskilling for manufacturing, your manufacturing members?
So we're not just stopping at manufacturing. So that's the new thing that we've added to the mix the last 2 years is, while manufacturing is still the core, we've seen a lot of opportunities in the design field to improve and upskill people as well. Historically, our certification programs around the standards were aimed mainly at operators, the ones that are actually building the product, and even with automation, there's still a lot of manual labor that takes place. So those skills are still important. Soldering skills are very important. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. I know you have some questions about that too.
Yeah. I want to come back to that. Yeah.
What we're focused on now is also branching out, and we're seeing a lot of opportunities to train young engineers. And I'll give you a really interesting story. When I was a student, an electrical engineering student at the University of Illinois, almost 40 years ago, it was mandatory that we would have lab courses and learn what a circuit board was, and how to solder, and how to wire, and how to test and do all those things. In fact, in most engineering curriculums, you have to take 2 of those lab courses over your 4-year period. What's happening now, and this is a global problem, this is not just a North American problem or a US problem, this is happening globally, is, all these engineers come out of school and they want to learn how to design a semiconductor, or they want to be part of Google, or they want to be part of Microsoft. And great, the ambition is, I love the ambition, but a lot of times they get hired by EMS companies and by OEMs, and they've never seen a circuit board in their life. And yet that's the life fuel for these companies, is processing circuit boards and assembling circuit boards. So this complaint was raised to us on numerous occasions, and we finally built a program in it to focus on getting young, fresh out college grads in engineering who are going to be in that type of manufacturing environment. We've put some training courses together on what is a circuit board, what does circuit board assembly mean, what is throughput, what is through-hole technology versus pick and place.
Wait, an electrical engineer coming out of college doesn't know what those are? Wow, that's a little surprising. Well, what do they know?
Because it's viewed as old school, old technology.
Oh, really?
What most people don't realize is that at least 12 to 15 times a day, every human in the Western world is doing something that involves or engages a circuit board. They don't know it, but they are.
Wow, that's interesting. So is that something also, because I know, it's not like they're like as if there's an excess of engineering talent out there. Can you find smart people and bring them up to speed using that kind of training, or do they need to have the analytical background?
No, I mean, it's a mixed bag, Ed. I mean, yes, there's opportunities for 4-year college students to learn more and be engaged in their EMS company or their OEM, but we're also finding opportunities for people that come out of kind of the 2-year programs, who have become, say, a high-level operator, or maybe they're an inspector in their facility, and we can get them from an inspector level to some rudimentary engineering skills that can add value to that company. So we've seen really progressive companies take some of their very experienced line operators and highly experienced inspectors, and I'm not saying they turn them into engineers, but they're given enough training where they can do some of those basic engineering activities.
Well, that's like in medical school. You have a physician's assistant. You don't need a doctor for everything, right? Same sort of thing.
Exactly right.
All right, so let's get to that soldering competition. I know you go to, I see that all the time on LinkedIn, and that looks just fascinating. So what do you have to do to win soldering competitions, and what's the purpose of doing those, and what kind of response do you get?
Well, that's great. Thanks for asking. That's a great question. It's been an opportunity for us to showcase a couple of the key IPC standards. Yes, we're calling ourselves Global Electronics Association now, but we're still keeping the IPC brand for the standards and for the certification program. So I'm still referring to it as IPC standards. It started out as how do we shine the spotlight on the value of IPC standards and the value of IPC training? And when you go to trade shows, you got the 90% of the folks kind of have their little racks with their little booklets and pamphlets, and those things get really boring, right? And then you got 10% of the crowd that's doing something really interesting in their booth. And for us, it was, well, what can we do something that's interesting in the booth to try to draw an audience, but at the same time keep the spotlight focused on what we are about, which is standards and training. And that was the birth of the standards of the hand soldering competition. We started in Europe. We did some in Asia. We tried a few in the U.S. market, but the popularity of that thing has been bigger in Europe, in parts of Asia, and in Mexico.
Interesting.
What we do is we at a trade event for the region, we will get permission from the organizers of that event, because these aren't always our events. We go to other people's events as well. We get permission to do this competition. It creates a lot of fun. It creates some energy. People learn, and you get companies that bring their workers to compete. And it's a test board, and you have to solder components on the test board, and it has to work. It's a functional board. It's meant to work, and you're gauged on, is it working? How is what's the visual inspection of your board? And did you finish it within the 45-minute time allotment? And then from that, we have a scoring system. And then for each region crowns a winner. And then all the winners meet in Munich in November for the World Championship. And every year the World Championship is held at one of the large events in Germany.
Wow, that sounds cool. So how many people do you get participating? That's a brilliant idea.
At any given, so at the regional events, we typically get somewhere between 45 and 70 competitors per region. And then we crown a victor for each of those regions. And then the top regions send their lead to Munich. And so the world competition usually has somewhere between 15 and 20 competitors.
Wow, that sounds great.
And now we're starting a new competition effective, and we've done a little bit of trialing of it in 2025. In 2026, we're bringing a wire harness competition to the floor as well.
Now, I'm not familiar with that production process. I mean, what would they do to compete?
It's the same type of thing. It's assembling a cable or a wire harness assembly is a lot like assembling a circuit board. All right. There's different tools. It's mainly more wire driven, more connector driven, more crimp driven, but there's still a visual inspection that goes with that. You still have to create something that functions, and there's still a time element to it as well. So it's an opportunity for us to kind of continue the competition and kind of move now away from hand soldering, because we've done that for 12 years, and do something a little bit more futuristic with electric vehicles taking off, and with so many of the industrial products now usually using a heavy amount of wiring and harness capability. It's time to kind of put the spotlight on harness capability and wiring.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Well, so we got it. We can't get out of here with talking about AI. What are you seeing in terms of the effects of AI and the electronics industry?
You can't escape it. It's prevalent in everything we're doing, and there are opportunities with AI, and there are obviously risks with AI. I'll focus on the opportunities for your podcast here. When I think of manufacturing, I think of basically three or four areas. I think of design, I think of the assembly, I think of the test. What AI is doing is it's allowing us to improve abilities in all three of those key areas. So let's take design, for example. The tools now that you have with AI for design for manufacturing and the optimization that goes with that, just in the last year, I've seen things that are like light years ahead of where we were 5 years ago. So companies that are willing to take advantage of those tools are going to have better designs. When you look at the assembly process, the predictive analytics that go with downtime on equipment, the quality control that's being done by visual inspections are all AI driven now. And so we're seeing better product come out of those machines. All right. So what does that do? Well, that means waste is going to be down, defects are going to be down. Hopefully you're improving your reliability as the product goes through the assembly. The test sequences for even the most intricate technologies used to be, in some cases, hours and days of testing. AI has given us an opportunity to bring that testing now down to minutes.
Wow, that's impressive. Now, are you seeing widespread adoption of that, or people?
No. I'm giving you a glimpse of what the cutting edge companies are doing. Now the key is, what can the other companies and the masses do to be adopting some of that? And that's a role that we want to play. We want to say, look, these opportunities are there. What can we do to help the rest of the industry embrace these opportunities so they can be better, faster, cheaper as well?
Yeah, it is amazing what it'll do for you. It'll be interesting to see where things develop. So there's a lot of things going on out there. What would you say you're most excited about in your new role?
I think the work that we're doing to really lean into advocacy, government relations, being the cheerleader for the industry on a global scale, the new work we want to do in terms of our industry intelligence. We want to be more seen as a thought leader, developing more reports that actually help companies, do be better at their jobs. The new stuff that we're embracing, I think, is going to be a difference maker for the industry. And the fact that we're doing it at a global scale, the fact that we recognize that so much of the influencers and the thought leaders, there are so many of them that are not just concentrated in one area, but you find them in North America, you find them in Europe, you find them in Japan. And if we can harness all of that thought leadership, it's going to allow us to become a better trade association, develop better solutions for the industry. So I think that the thing I'm most excited about is the fact that we just get to talk to more people and learn from more people. That's, as a lifelong learner, that's kind of how I'm wired is, hey, this new role just opens the possibility for me to hear more from experts and thought leaders, and then taking that information and bringing it in-house and using that to develop better products going forward. I mean, that's the excitement.
Yeah, that sounds great. A lot to look forward to. For advocacy, I realize probably tariffs is a big issue that you're working on. You mentioned about there's two phases to it. You can implement the tariff, but you need support with support for capacity. Are those primary advocacy topics right now, or are there others that you're working on?
No, there's all sorts. There's issues with, what chemicals we can and can't be using. What's the exemption criteria? Obviously, we created this thing, the industry created this thing many years ago called lead-free solder as an example, but still most of the high-rel industries are still using leaded solder because lead-free, while has some huge advantages, you still don't want 747s falling out of the sky.
You don't, yeah.
So compliance is a big thing we're focused on. Export control, the use of chemicals and the restrictions around chemicals. Those are three of the big things, along with what you mentioned earlier, which are the tariff and the trade issues.
Interesting. Well, there's always plenty to work on and advocate for. All right. Well, let's talk about a little bit of Sanjay Huprikar, the boy. When you grow up, what brought you as a kid? I mean, tell a little bit about your background. I mean, you have siblings. Where'd you grow up?
Well, happy to share. So I'm the child of immigrants. My parents emigrated from India in the mid 1960s. I was born here, so I'm proud to be an American. Grew up, born and raised, and live in the Chicago area. So I've never left this area. It's my home. Always was interested in math and science growing up. And so engineering felt like a logical choice. It provided opportunity to kind of use that part of my brain, which I really liked. And it provided enough challenge that kept me my attention.
Where do you think that came from? Your mom or dad, doctors, engineers?
Yeah, both my parents are scientists. Were scientists, so I think that's where that came from. My younger brother is a physician, so he kind of went the science route as well.
Okay.
And so I've always been attracted to math, science. I've always been attracted to engineering. I've always been attracted to technology. Everything I've done has been in the capacity of either doing something engineering related to technology or something on the business development or marketing side of technology.
And so what were some of those early jobs?
First job out of school was with Motorola as a fresh out. And that was an incredible experience at a company at a very incredible time. Motorola had just won the Malcolm Baldrige Award for quality.
And were they big into, was that the beginning of Six Sigma there? Because that's where it started.
Yeah, 88 and 89, which is around the time I joined, were the early days of Six Sigma. And so that was incredible exposure. And I think what I learned most at, and probably useful for some of your younger viewers, is always strive to be a lifelong learner. always strive to have mentors around you. I mean, I don't mind sharing. I'm 58 years old. I've been in the industry for 37 years, and I still have mentors because there's always something to learn, right? And so having that ability at a very young age to be at a company surrounded by really thoughtful, intelligent people that you could just be a sponge and learn from was probably the best experience I've ever had. It easily is the experience, yeah, they're the hard, the hard and soft rules of engineering and things you learn along the way. But just having that group of people guiding you, teaching you, being a resource for you, there's just no substitute for that.
I completely agree. I will take out and friends will say, "Oh, my son or daughter is thinking about being an engineer. I know you're an engineer. Would you talk to him about it?" And that's really my repeated piece of advice. Find a company that does good training, right, to get started.
And good training comes in so many forms, right? There's the HR piece of it where every employee needs to have, 40 hours of professional development. I mean, I think those are good metrics as well. But just surrounding yourself with people who believe in knowledge sharing and passing knowledge on to the generations. If you can surround yourself with that type of ilk, you're going to be better off for the future.
Yes, and open-minded, willing to learn. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. So you've done a lot of traveling across the world, a lot of different cultures. What's influenced you personally about working in the different cultures? What makes it easier or harder to work across different cultures?
I don't look at it as easy or hard. I just look at it as every time you do it, it's a learning experience. You add something to your toolkit. You become very in tune with how different people think about a similar issue. And it just teaches you to be, like you pointed out, a great term you used earlier, just teaches you to be more open-minded about how you solve problems, right? And just the exposure to different cultures and learning from different people around the world, it just enriches you in so many unbelievable ways, both at a professional level as well as a personal level.
Yeah, definitely. So then covered a lot of different areas, but one more, what do you do for fun outside of work?
Well, I go to Rolling Stones concerts and see Ed Pound there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was funny. Yeah, for the audience, we were both at the Rolling Stones at Soldier Field and bumped into each other on the field. That was fun. Yeah, that was a good concert. I enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So so when I do have some free time, I still like to see shows. I'm very much an audiophile, so I'm very much into music. I play in a company band.
Oh, wait a minute. Whoop, stop right there. What do you play?
I'm a rhythm guitar player and a vocalist. So we have a little company band where we do gigs, 2 or 3 times a year to support our events for the organization.
I did not know that. Wait, how long have you been doing that?
Probably 20 years.
Oh, well, I guess it escaped my memory from when we earlier worked together. Okay.
Huge baseball fan, so you'll find me at Wrigley quite regularly to watch the Cubs. And then my wife and I, as part of the work I do internationally, and then just we like traveling in general with our children, both raised and kind of doing their own thing now. We have more time to see some of the sights of the world that we've kind of been putting on our bucket list for so many years. So
sounds great. Well, people told my wife she was an empty nester. She says, "Nope, I'm a free bird." So there you go. Well, listen, Sanjay, it's been wonderful catching up with you, hearing about the GEA. You're doing great work there, and I'm glad to be able to share it with the audience. And the website
is www.electronics.org.
All right. Wow, that's a pretty good URL to get. Okay. Well, listen, thanks so much for the participating on the podcast. Let's keep in touch.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And thanks for all the great work you and the other folks are doing at Operation Science Institute. I'm happy to support it. It's a great opportunity to continue to pass on important information and here to do what you need me to do to support that, Ed.
Thank you. Let's keep pushing.
You as well, Ed. Thank you so much.
The Operation Science podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. Join the Operation Science Institute at opscience.org. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not represent their company's views unless specifically stated as such.